can see me properly, and I'll start without any further delay. So good evening, everyone. I'm Lalit Gautam. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SenseGrass. And education-wise, I'm a doctorate of pharmaceutical science and medicine, an MBA in international marketing and finance. I also be a pre-seed investor, especially into the deep tech and social impact companies, and of course, agri-tech mentor as well. Today, according to the event today, I'm going to talk about the climate impact on the agriculture for the food security. So I think this is a broad title, but when we're going to talk about the more the deeper, when we go into more deeper segment into that the whole topic, that I think the one of the area where I'm working for the last many years is that the data and the food security. So the title of this presentation or this paper is going to be about how data is going to feed the population, not the food. Uh, and I think the agriculture intent, we talk about a lot about the artificial intelligence, but I think today we're going to talk about the agricultural intelligence that tackling the climate change issues in Europe and the rest of the world. So I think the one of the conclusion of this presentation is going to be that we do not need food to feed the population, but we need the good data to feed the entire population. So to start with, as I have a 15-minute slot, so just to wrap up and I'm sure like most of the people in the room is very much familiar about the problem that in the last few years, uh, the climate change has impacted a lot on our food ecosystem, and by the 2040 we won't be able to feed the entire populations because our lands are getting smaller. We are not growing sufficient healthy food to feed the entire population. And I think the one of the most reasonable reason for this is that we're wasting a lot of crop because we have no idea how to tackle this climate change that impacting on our food ecosystem. When we talk about the agriculture or food ecosystem, we have to break down this entire ecosystem into the multiple part. The first, which is soil or below the soil part. The second, which is soil and above the land, which is crop, and of course the third one is the environmental. Uh, but I think the most precisely I'm going to talk about the soil first because soil is considered to be the soul of the agriculture. Like in our human body, we have our soul. The same for agriculture. The soil is always considered to be the soul of the agriculture as well. And our soil, which is the soil, is infected, is polluted because we're putting a lot of chemical fertilizers, we're wasting a lot of water. The soil is becoming degraded, and the lands are getting and smaller and smaller, right? And the use of the one of the key reason why the soil is not becoming fertile and the zero level and all these kind of situation has already arrived in many parts of the world because we keep spreading chemical fertilizers again and again and again because we have no idea what happening under the soil. So what happening under the soil is a mystery for all of us, right? And unfortunately the only conventional method we have to find out the what exactly is the nutrition value or what exact amount of the fertilizer we need is a very orthodox method. So no matter if you are in Belgium, in Europe, in India, in Africa, or US, the only conventional way we have to find out the soil nutrition value is a traditional lab method, where we randomly pick the soil sample, go to these labs. These labs use the chemical soil test, and then at the end they get the report card. Right? It's a very complex, very long process. And of course it's not a very realistic process, right? Of course it's a small unit ratio, very expensive, and at the end of the day you only get a data card. And what we need to do with the data to find out the solution is a mystery, right? Then we have to go to the experts to find out what exactly we have to do again and again and again. And I think the things change in the food ecosystem very rapidly, so we cannot wait for all this entire long process. And I think whenever we talk about the food, especially of course the audience we have here is coming from the very diverse background. We have the the PhD candidates, we have the food and agro and soil experts here in the room. But I think for the general audience, for the general population, we always think that this food problem is only related to the farmers, right? But I think it's impacting the entire ecosystem. The bad practices because of the climate change is impacting the crop. We are not able to get the sufficient food. We are also getting the very highly expensive food as well. And of course, these chemicals, fertilizers are impacting the environmental. And the third one, the lack of the information is impacting the people like you and me. Those are working in the ecosystem, especially the universities, the governments, the research institutions, and of course the corporates. Those are growing the food for all of us. So I think this is a huge problem, but it's a very interconnected to each other. And I think hello. Okay. So when we talk about the agriculture, I think we have to talk about that. I think the one of the important thing in the agriculture ecosystem is that it's a very broken ecosystem, right? It's available in the bits and pieces. Everything is very much divided, and it's a very non-connected kind of sector. What we have seen in the other industries, which is very well connected, in agriculture is a very labor-intensive, very old, industry, which is not very well connected. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's a very broken system. And I think when you have a broken system, it's very hard to bring any changes into that ecosystem. So let's talk about the three important areas which has been impacted by the climate change, which is of course the farm related challenges, which is very much core to the farmers, very close to the farmers, like the climate variations, lack of information has making the nutrition value, it's very hard for to find out the real time monitoring of these information. When we talk about the second, which is the market challenge, which is of course related to the different stakeholders like the supply chain, corporates, warehouses, even including the government, that is in a very uncertain demand. For example, sometimes we have very high growth of grapes or soya bean, but we don't have the demand, right? So vice versa. So this is also kind of creating a imbalance in that ecosystem. And the third one is a government, industry, university focus factors, which includes all of us, I think. And I think this is the ignorance of the government aids. We do not have the kind of visibility in that ecosystem that also make this industry very challenging. And of course, like when we talk about the challenges and the desired output, that what we are expecting in terms of the output and what are the challenges we have, is again I have breakdown into the two important part, that what are the challenges and what are the desired output we want to tackle this climate change impact on the agriculture, right? So for example, uh, when we talk about the farmers, which is the direct end user of this industry, agriculture, these people are the one who growing the food for all of us, and they are the highly impacted by these kind of climate change uh, issues on the field. And of course, like the delayed detection in the advisory, which is the most important, because farmers are not the tech savvy, they are not engineers, they are not the scientists. So I think the lack of information, the lack of knowledge, the lack of advisory, especially the timely information, make their life very difficult, right? And I think the desired output which we can bring them with the solution, with the technology that will make their life very easy, is the real-time informations, alerts, and all. And when we talk about the Department of Agriculture, I think here the university comes as well in this bracket. That unavailability of reason-wise data, the data and bits and pieces, how to use those data into putting into the information is another challenge. But I think the desired outcome which we can provide to them is like the classification, putting all these data together in a more structured way, which giving the inputs to these universities to make the more desired research and outcome to these folks. And of course, the third one is about the governments as well, where the lack of quality seed, lack of the low yield information, and again the timely input, access to these information to the governments make the entire ecosystem more workable. Uh, So I think the one of the outcome of that agriculture, especially coming from the startup field or startup background, I think the technology has given us a lot to tackle these climate change impact or the climate mitigation and adoption technology on the farming side. Of course, like starting from the precision agriculture using the IoT, which is we are using, and I think when we talk about the climate change impact on the agriculture, I have to break down again into the three important points. The first thing that we need to educate the people with then educate the people to tell about that here the climate change is real and this is happening because most of the people are not aware about these kind of changes. The second thing, once you educate the person, educate the the entire population, you have to create a framework that use entire information, generating the data and putting this data into a proper framework to give a desired result. And the third one is that how the desired result or output have to be used or implemented into the practices, so that will change the practices and bring a better output, right? So again, when we start from the first point, we have to use these kind of data collection technologies like IoT, remote sensing, integration database, and creating into the framework that will help the entire stakeholder, which we have discussed in the last slide, for farmers, for universities, for governments, to provide a very desired output so they can implement, they can make some take some action points to tackle these challenges. So now let me give you a use case. I do not want to be sound like promoting the company, but I think let me try to give a use case that what we are doing in SenseGrass to tackle this challenge. So I'm Lalit, I'm the co-founder and CEO of SenseGrass as well. We based out in Europe, and we solving one of the critical issue of the agriculture problem, where we're generating our own data, structural data, and utilizing this data into such a nice framework where we're giving the very personalized recommendations to the people. So let's talk about the solution. We talk a lot about the problem in the agriculture, that the data is not available, the data or the ecosystem is very broken, it's in bits and pieces. The timely information is not available. If timely information is available, it's a very broad, very generic information. So because like in a human body, our land, our soil behave like in a human body, and every human body is different from other body, right? I may require a different nutritions, different protein, or different volume of protein, different quantity of carbohydrate. Maybe that some other person in the room require a very different level of nutrition, protein, carbohydrate according to their body. So our soil and land act in a similar way. Each land, each farm, each soil required a different kind of nutrition or input in a different way according to your information. So, for example, if you're growing a soya bean or a strawberry in Belgium, in Brussels, while I'm growing the same soya bean or strawberry in South France or one in India, this is a similar crop, but it required a very different information, right? So, what SenseGrass is doing, SenseGrass bringing the world first farm operating system, and this farm operating system, when I use the word farm operating system, it's a very advanced, very innovative word. But what we're trying to build is we're trying to create such an ecosystem where the entire information coming from the different the vertical, where we have our own data, where we have the multiple public data, and coming all together process and giving the very personalized inputs to the user. So this solution, after 4 years of research and 4 patents, we have created this a full stack solution, which is a combination of our patented soil nutrition sensor and an AI agronomy SaaS platform. We're reducing your input cost, especially the amount of fertilizers, carbon, and the climate change factors, and increasing your yield and the income by 20-25%. And this is also validated and adopted by some of the large corporate. So let me tell you very precisely how this solution works. So we combine four types of our own proprietary data, which is our own sensor data, imageries coming from hyperspectrals, the weather-based information, and the user historical information, the practices they are doing. And we process these four proprietary data with some additional public data and process hundreds of ideal data points like soil type, subsoil type, crop, topography, location, pH, all this information, and process and gives a very personalized inputs to the corporates, to the farmers, so they can make a very easy and actionable insights which help them to take the decision making. Uh, so you can see in a single software what we're trying, like you can assume as a window, right? You assume SenseGrass as a window, as a Microsoft window, where the one single operating system inputting all these information and giving a multiple and a very customized use cases according to the people that will help them to tackle different problem, whether these are regenerative agriculture, whether these are providing the best seed at the best field, or maybe this is a carbon footprint, or maybe the financial or the loan repayment as well. So there are multiple use cases which we are trying to build, and I think the benefit of these kind of technology, and especially the SenseGrass solution which we have discussed, and apart from the other technology which I have mentioned in my previous slide, I think the benefit is not just to the farmers, to the agro corpus, to the university. Is a very cumulative ecosystem. The one important thing I would like to mention here, and I think this is going to be my conclusion of this presentation, is that I think the one important thing is agriculture is a very diverse, is a very different industry as compared to any other industry, and it's a very broken ecosystem as well. So if we really want to tackle this climate change impact on our food ecosystem, we have to be work together. We have to be work in a collaborative way where all the companies, all the stakeholders, government, universities all have to come together, sharing their insights, sharing their data, and work for one common goal. Then it will be a very useful tool, because the benefit of these kind of solutions is also very cumulative, and it will be very useful for the entire stakeholder. And I think with this statement, I have to wrap up my discussion, my presentation. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm more than happy to take the questions, maybe the later part of the discussion. Thank you so much.
Group leader at the Department of Plant Systems Biology of the University. He has published more than 50 articles in international journals, and he is on the website of unlocking potential for agriculture, and he knows that the new green technology. Yes. Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very grateful that I got this invitation to speak here, and I had the pleasure to spend the lesson today. When I got this invitation, actually I thought it was not such an easy task to do, because I have to represent academia here a little bit. I have to talk about technologies that help climate-smart agriculture, and I have to tie this all up together. And first of all, I want to make already a disclaimer that I'm only a very small part of academia that is being presented here, and only one small topic. And so maybe I should first introduce this. Okay, so as they were explaining, I work at two institutes. The first one is actually okay. What can I do? Okay, this is better. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I actually work at BIB. BIB is an institute that fosters research in biotechnology and life sciences, and it does so in many different fields, as you can see here, mainly in health issues, but there is one department which focuses on plants. That's actually where I work. And VIB is a research center, so as such it is not a university, but VIB associates with different universities across Flanders and associates there with different groups that perform life science research. As such, I am also associated with Ghent University, and so I'm actually wearing two hats. I'm a group leader at VIB, but I also have some teaching assignments at Ghent University. And so, in our center, we put plants central, and that's also what I want to convince you here today. So there is also potential within the plant that we are trying to discover. And at VIB, we are mainly interested in basic research, so we want to understand how plants are growing, how they are adapting to changes in the environment, and we then hope, because one of the mottos of VIB is also to bring value to society, to translate this knowledge also to value for society when possible. And when I looked at what is actually the definition of climate-smart agriculture, they were already mentioned earlier today, these fit perfectly well with the missions of our institute. If you saw some examples. So also it was already talked about soy earlier today, and so soy is a really important basis of plant-based protein intake for humans. However, the majority of the soy that we consume these days is imported mainly from Brazil, which is not a sustainable way to do this. However, it is not so easy to cultivate soy in Europe, and so we have embarked in a citizen science project to grow soy in 1,000 gardens here in Flanders, so that we can start to understand what is needed, what are the problems, which soils acquire better the soil. This helps for more sustainable agriculture because we have a local production of plant-based proteins, but also these soil plants can make nodules and do nitrogen fixation, which can also help for sustainable agriculture. And this is one part of the research. Another part looks at different traits of plants. So here it is the root system. You see different types of crops have a different root system. So you can imagine when you grow them in a similar soil, for instance, in Belgium or in any region, this might have differences, difficulties to grow certain crops in certain climates. But we think that once we understand how a plant does, why it does this, and how it adjusts, for instance, its root system or other traits to local changes in the environment, that we can take benefit of this for agriculture. However, we are also more focused on biotechnology and molecular biology, so we don't only look at how plants are growing and what their phenotypes are, is how we call this, but we also want to know what happens in the different cells at molecular level. And gradually, we do this with higher and higher resolution, and these days we are doing this already at a single cell level. And this mainly comes from the insights that we've gained over the last couple of years, and that is that our technology so far has been mainly a brute force approach. We took very strong way to modulate genes, we modulate them in all cell types, and then we look what happens. So very often we see very positive traits, for instance, in the roots, but then we see negative effects appearing in the shoots. And that is because this gene has a different function in the root and in the shoot. Now, this is a simplified way because even if you now look closer, it is even having sometimes a different role in the different cell types within a root system. And so we want to understand how these genes function at a single cell level within one organ, so in a different cell type. And you can also imagine that all this type of information, different cell types, we look actually always genome-wide. This means we look at all the genes that are expressed in given conditions. We are rapidly talking about 20,000 to 40,000 genes, depending on which plant we're looking at. And so we are also looking into machine learning and artificial intelligence to make sense out of all this data and to get some. So that this is pretty much what the sample does. Now we'll gradually switch a little bit to what our team does and where the plant potential lies. So my main interest for the moment lies in maize. And if you think about maize, you typically nowadays think about something that looks like this. However, maize actually originates from tails. And so a lot of years have gone past before we have domesticated tails to become actually the maize like we know it now. And even if you think about maize in Belgium, it looks like this, but not everywhere around the world it looks like these pops with yellow kernels on them. And so this means that there is also a lot of natural variation, and this natural variation makes that the maize plant grows differently, for instance, where it originates from Central America than in Europe. And even in Europe, breeding has led to the fact that we can now already cultivate maize very high up north in Europe, which is actually quite remarkable because actually maize is a tropical or a subtropical plant. And if you think about it, Belgium for most of the time is not tropical. We can cultivate maize very well. We can even go up to Scandinavia these days. So this really means that plants have a lot of potential to adapt to changes in the climate, and we can, as humans, also guide this process a little bit. And so now switching slowly to the focus of our team, we focus actually on how a plant grows. And so often if you think about growth, if you think about your children, you measure their height and then you say, oh, you have grown a lot. And so you look actually at an endpoint measurement. But actually, to go to this endpoint, a lot of processes should happen. And with the plants, it's even different than in animals. Growth takes place throughout the entire development. Because a lot of the plant organs are being formed post-embryonically, which is different to us humans and animals. In addition, a plant is sown, for instance, here in Belgium, we sow maize at the end of April, beginning of May. And it grows throughout the entire summer period. It's harvested somewhere in fall. So it means it also encounters a lot of changes in the environment throughout its development. And it needs to cope with these changes at any given moment through development. And one of the first things the plant will do is start to adjust its system by slowing down its growth. And then, depending on how severe the stress is and how long it persists, different mechanisms will go into action. But we can thus use stress, such as, for instance, drought, as a modulator of growth. And we can see how the growth of the plant is fine-tuned under a condition that slows down the growth. So as you can see, these plants are grown in our greenhouse, but we have an automated plant phenotyping system that allows to monitor plant growth throughout their development or maize growth throughout their development in an automated way. And we can adjust nutrient solutions and watering regimes so we can actually mimic, for instance, high nitrogen conditions, low nitrogen conditions, or drought conditions in the lab. And so actually, over the past couple of years, we set up a pipeline where we identify genes which are important for a certain trait or process. Then we have also set up tools for, like genome editing and CRISPR technology to start to modulate those genes. And this, I will come back to the CRISPR technology later on. Once we then have plants which have small changes in their DNA, We look at them in our automated plant phenotyping platform in the greenhouse to see whether we see obvious changes in how the plant looks and what are potential effects on productivity of the plant. And then we take these positive looking lines to field trials to see if the effects that we see in the greenhouse also hold true under field conditions. And so sometimes it actually looks like it works, and sometimes it also doesn't work. So there is still quite a big bridge to gap, a gap to bridge, between the research that we do in the field and what we know in the greenhouse. And so, because I needed to focus a bit on technologies, we recently have applied a novel technology in the lab. And I think I can highlight a little bit what the importance of academia is in technology development. So I already indicated to you that there are single cell technologies, and this is one example of our lab where we applied single cell on a growing maize leaf. And so we have learned that these are the outside layer of the cell, and these are actually the veins and or the vasculature. But you need to take my word for it because you do not see where these genes are or what it is. This is very abstract. And this is because we have identified individual cells, and it's very difficult to get spatial information on this. Now, in the animal field, people have found a technology to visualize multiple genes simultaneously in a tissue context. And so we have now also applied this technology to plants. And so this is really how academia also drives technology development. So there was a research question originally in the animal field, which allowed to make the development of this technology. Then several spin-off companies came which adopted this technology and offers them as a fee for service. Then they were looking for new business opportunities and they teamed up with us, a plant lab, because plant cells are completely different than animal cells. In the fact, for instance, that they have a cell wall and so on. And so we helped them to co-develop this technology also for use in plants. And they, of course, had then the benefit that they understood better how they can also apply it to plants. And for us, this helped to address several biological questions that we had, and also to put visual ID on what is ongoing in these colored clusters here. And so maybe this I can summarize how I think academia also plays a role in pushing technologies forward. As I said already, first of all, in the development. Sometimes we have a need, a question. We develop a technology that often then goes its own way into spin-off companies. We can still help with innovation of the technology, always improve the technology. And finally, I think we can also help to bring technologies to biology and really do the interpretation thereof. So this was one example. The second example that I would like to highlight is actually genome editing. Gene editing, new breeding technologies, precision breeding. There have been so many names for this technology, which actually seems to be one of the ways of we can improve traits and agriculture in making changes in the DNA. The big difference is actually that it allows to work very targeted, and as such it is thought to be much faster as well, considered with conventional breeding. And so also here this technology knows a very rapid improvement. So if you look in PubMed and if you type this in, you almost find on a weekly basis papers that show new improvements. So there are new nucleases that can be either more specific or have different overhangs, different recognition sites, and so on. So this is a very rapidly emerging technology. And this is because it has a lot of potential, because you can really tell it to go to a specific one place in the genome and make a change in the DNA there. And otherwise, we can also do this at multiple genes simultaneously. And as the technology is now evolving, we can not only tell it to go to a certain place in the genome and make a change, we can actually tell it to change one nucleotide for another nucleotide. And this really will allow us maybe not only to, or not specifically to speed forward breeding, but to increase our understanding and to test whether new changes in the DNA would have at least similar benefits than what is already present. And the fact is actually that this technology leads to plants that are indistinguishable from plants that are bred for in a normal way, because it is the opposite to what other people seem to think. There is no foreign DNA present in genome editing. And so because of the importance or the potential of genome editing for agriculture, an initiative was taken, which is called EU SAGE, which covers a lot of European academic institutes that all see the potential of genome editing in Europe. And so they're now making a database that collects all crops that have positive traits due to genome editing. And you can see here there are 7 categories. So first there is plant productivity, how plants react on the abiotic conditions such as drought, but also biotic stress conditions such as pests. But we can also see an improved quality of the food or the flavor or the color. But we can also think that we want to store the goods for a longer period of time, or we have an improved industrialization or the use of it afterwards. And so if we then look at these traits for the moment, most of the traits that are improved by genome editing are related to plant productivity and the food quality. And if you look at the type of crops, it is actually quite remarkable that these are not only the cash crops, so it's not only the big crops like maize and wheat and so on, but you also see that this cluster gets applied in crops that are much less known, at least like in opposite to what is the fact for GMO crops. However, as most of you know, in Europe, we have a problem with the legislation. So since 2018, the legislation tells us that we should treat genome-edited plants as GMO plants, despite the fact that there is no foreign DNA inserted, and that they are actually indistinguishable from natural varieties that are inserted. And I think Europe is a bit in a position that isolates from the rest of the world, where either the discussion is still ongoing or it is already deregulated. And so also EU SAGE is taking a positive stage in there, because it was launched or officially launched in 2020, and it really tries to help also with lobbying to get this technology outside of the GMO legislation. And the fact that this is not only important for industry or for applications, but also then for basic research. I can highlight this example. So this is one line that we obtained from our own research on drought tolerance. So we made here the CRISPR mutant, and we compare it to a sibling which is not edited. But when we grow them under normal conditions, no phenotypes. But when we grow them under water deficit, which means that they get less water, I hope you can see that these plants look much nicer and bigger. And so we have now applied for
one next discussion we talked about how the economy is transforming agriculture.
It's fine. Okay. Hi everyone. So unlike I think everyone in the room, I'm not coming from research or logical background. I'm a lawyer by background. And yes, I wanted to talk, and I will talk about data analytics and technology. But while I was listening to two previous speakers, it's all super fascinating. And when I'm listening to it, all I can think is, this is an opportunity, you can start a company. This is an opportunity, you can start a company. And we have been working with several universities in Europe and Israel previously. And I unfortunately can see that research is very underfunded. And there is not only lack in like collaboration in terms of data, but more lack of collaboration in terms of business opportunities and like business experience and sales experience between companies and universities. Universities have such a wide range of ideas and technologies that can be already used, even if you don't think that way, because I have, you know, researchers on my team who would be happy to research a very specific topic for the 5 years, while the product would be done even like in 6 months if we are talking of something that would be of a use for a market. So my personal belief is that technologically we are advanced enough to basically save this planet and create something very cool. But unfortunately, in the 21st century, we didn't learn how to collaborate, how to exchange data. Universities have a lot of data and research. And I'm not even talking about success stories. It's, for example, for machine learning, it doesn't matter per se if the data is successful or data is failed, because it can learn from the failed data. And for example, at Lava, we sometimes kill plants on purpose so that the machine learning can learn faster. And I'm sure that everything is like very well documented in here, but unfortunately, if you're trying to find anything in libraries of research centers or universities, it's incredibly hard to do it, and it's incredibly hard to implement it afterwards. So just one more second, there are a couple of things. Yeah, and basically we are also now developing as a side, project side company, a way for such research projects or negative emission projects to develop an additional income stream from or CO2 credits or patents. There are like a lot of ways of how you can monetize all of this, besides investment or just funding from European Commission. But unfortunately, I would say 99% of projects just don't even know that they have such an opportunity. And it breaks my heart to see that another fast delivery company would raise 100 million because they can do delivery 5 minutes faster than the other one. And then research projects just don't get any funding, whether like exchange data and exchange information. But now I will talk a bit about what we specialize in. About my personal background, as I mentioned, I'm a lawyer by background, but I managed to build Lava. I managed to win funding from European Commission, from Sony, from Tesla CTO, like create a product roadmap, and so from there, I guess it's not specifically working for me. Basically, Lalit already defined the problem, but while Lalit is working with outdoor and agriculture, we are more focused on indoor. So the problem remains the same. We will need pretty much 70% more food in the next 10 years to keep the population of our planet. And even, let's say, if Lalit's company is perfectly working and there are 100 more companies like that, we're still not going to be able to provide enough of food just from outdoor agriculture for various reasons. Well, from short in the space where we can grow things to logistical issues and so on and so forth. So a lot of concentration right now is going to indoor farming, and right now indoor farming is highly unprofitable, mainly because if it's indoors, it means you need to control quite a lot of parameters, which means your electricity bills are insanely high. So if we're talking about typical greenhouses, they're somewhat profitable because of high revenue they are getting and turnovers. But if we're talking about any vertical farm, 90% of vertical farms are not profitable, more than that they're never going to be profitable despite of insane investments from venture funds like 100 or 500 million. The solution is to reduce energy consumption as much as possible, or in general resources consumption as much as possible, and at the same time increase yield. So how we are doing it, or one of the efficient ways that we found out, is that we've created several products that help to deal with it. Firstly, it's hardware. Again, none of really great changes can be created without hardware or R&D. So at the moment, our product on the hardware side consists of the driver that helps us to control various parameters within the lamp. And I've seen the lamps today. So our lamps and the driver are like much more sophisticated than what is used here. And in general, research laboratories normally have a very limited possibility to get a cool tech. So our job is to actually get down the price on the market as much as possible, because in our lamp, we firstly have a possibility to control 5 different channels, from like red, blue to UV lights and obviously white light, to make light dimmer on incredibly high frequencies, control pulse filling and anything else. So you basically can make your own spectrum, you can make your own light intensity, you can make your own pulsation. You literally can play with all the possible and impossible parameters within the lamp. And that was our first product. And from there, we've developed a controller which can connect basically anything in the vertical farm, from ventilation to hydroponics or aeroponics system. But the point is that you can also mix your own chemicals in there or whatever you are using. So you don't need to deal with the systems on the market, or if you have an existing system, you basically can just connect to the app, put the right settings. You don't need to have 10 apps or 10 programs. You just deal with one, and you can control everything in the facility as much as you wish. And on the software side, what we have is basically an app that helps you to control all of that under the cloud where the information is processed, because obviously our tool is very convenient for research, and we are running continuous research at our lab. But more importantly, we want general consumers to be easily use that. That's why we provide them settings, so they don't need to run 6 months or 12 months research to start using our product, and that's incredibly important for the end consumer. And the last but not least, we are also using computer vision to train the system. So we developed a robot where we have, sorry, I'm out of breath, thermal RGB and LiDAR cameras integrated, which helps us to create 3D imaging of the plant and basically follow the growth of the plant, even on vertical farming facilities. So let's say when there are like thousands of crops, we can track their health, we can track their growth, and give, for example, results on the expected yield or tell the client if there is something wrong with the crop while it is growing. So at the end, what the client is getting is that we are able to reduce energy consumption on the facility with all numbers, at least by 75%. Sometimes we are going down to 88%. And we are also on average increasing yield by 20% at this point. And it means that it decreases OPEX costs at least by like 30% for the indoor farm. But why we were even able to get there? So I started the company 4 years ago and I didn't know anything. And my team actually appeared even a year after that. The funding and then like very smart people on board, plus a very good combination of business and technical and research people. I believe that every university, every research department should have at least one person who is very good at business development and sales, because then you can have additional revenue streams quite easily. For example, for our customers, as you can see, we were able to decrease the price of yield by 3 to 4 times, which means that they are getting much higher revenues because the end price for their consumers doesn't really change. And the market of indoor farming is insanely big. It's projected by next year basically to reach almost 200 billion, and it will keep growing, which means that there is enough of space for all kinds of cool technologies and projects in the future. Right team always makes a difference, and as you can see, we've done a ton of collaboration, and one of our most interesting collaborations was with actually Sony Innovation Fund, which is located in Paris, and they were fascinated that startups can move so much faster, because even if they do have funding to run a project, sometimes they don't have enough of human resource to run a project, which I was very surprised about, because Sony is like such a big corporate, and I'm assuming it's exactly the same problem in every research laboratory. So there are a lot of interesting issues that I've stumbled upon in the last 2 days, and while listening to the previous presenters, and personally, I would really be interested in looking on how these collaborations between private companies and universities and research centers can be made, and how we can complement each other, not only on like financial side, but also on like, for example, human resource side. Because when you're a company, you're building your research department from the scratch, and you're attracting, you know, researchers from like very different backgrounds, and it takes quite some time for them to be able to collaborate together. But if you're working with an existing research department, people normally know already each other, and the whole process goes so much faster. So yes, that's what I probably want to end up with, that more collaboration and then creating additional like revenue streams for research centers, which would mean that these research centers would be able to hire more human resource to run projects, and hopefully also create more products that can reach the market. Because even if we're talking about European Union is extremely slow. So even if you're doing a very cool research, and even if they're saying that they're really interested, it probably will reach the end customer good if in 5 years, but like normally like 7 to 10 years, unfortunately. So I really hope that the whole system changes at some point. Thank you so much.
Presentation. So we have a lot of questions in mind now. And we go for the last speaker of the night. It's Lars Elling. Lars is an investor and founder and CTO of FinTech Region Impact Group. Has been recently announced as one of the top 50 innovative clean tech coming to Europe. He's coming from Sweden and he's about food, for them.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all previous speakers. And thank you to BrIAS. Thank you so much for inviting me here. This is a very important session today. Hi, everybody listening in on Teams. Hope you're enjoying this session as well. Can you hear me well? Good. Yeah, so Lars, as I said, I'm Swedish. I'm entrepreneur for years. I said a little bit more in the end that I love companies and entrepreneurs who solve climate challenges in food. So I have kind of money. I have to grow. Anyone interested in that, an entrepreneur or a company, please reach out. You can get my contact details in there. But this is the topic today, and personally for me, because I started my career in health and fitness and I have a sports background. So growing over the years to understand the meaning of food, how important it is. What happens if you put diesel in a car? Doesn't work. So what does this mean for us in daily life, workplace, foods? Are we doing enough today with the food? There was a survey last week of actually Sweden was the worst country. We were eating most processed food. What does that mean? And can we improve that? So let's move on. I want you to leave on this session with takeaways. That's the objective of this session. So I want to share a story here today. And also compliment, and I was very happy with the session. We need to work together. The business, and entrepreneurs, finance. So I want to leave you with a story of hope. Why I'm saying hope is because it's so depressing. Climate change global warming, the world is going to go under 10 years. So I have good news. Are you ready? The world is not going to go under. Trust me, I'm Swedish. The world is not going to go under. But what is most important and who can impact what we can do? Everybody here, everybody now. So human change. Everyone thought about this climate change will be warming. Human change, because we can impact this today from now. Every second of the choices. So let's be with a story of hope at the start. I also beyond this. I have a background in big tech, so I'm really happy and I've been following knowledge. I can't emphasize it. It's about data. That is more important. The one who can analyze the data, the importance is to analyze the data and to provide value. Just data. Second thing on this is that I want you to be inspired by this. The call to action stronger. Everybody out there, just get. And also, let's look into new models. So, how are we doing things today? I'm open that we should always look at how we can improve. Are we stuck in old habits? Or can we actually look constantly be curious? I think as an entrepreneur, for anyone's really to be curious. But can we improve? I hope if I'm asking you, is it looking good on the live broadcast? Everybody out there, can you see it? Okay, so you can have some invitations and call for action. And why I want to use it about kiss the ground, how many have seen it? And so, oh, I'm really happy I brought it up. It's one of the best rules to see, to understand how it works, how ecosystem, soil, the importance, and where food comes from. Ask people today, where does food come from? The soil. So kiss the ground. Also look at Little Big Farm. It also explains the connections, also in the some before of the ecosystem, the importance of nutrients in the soil. So kiss the ground, please. Okay, so the background of this, what is it? Why is it a challenge? I don't like to call these problems challenge. Problems is quite negative, so challenge, and we're getting close to 8 billion people. We're estimated to be 10 billion, and some said by 2050. So what does it mean then? Are we looking at the demography, how we are? We will heard about smart cities. And related to this, no one talks about the food. Where's the food going to come from? So this is connected to this session as well today of indoor farming, the importance of that. So we can do hyper-local production of food anywhere. Or high quality. So if you look at the numbers, you can think of 70% of the 10 billion who live in the cities. But let's not forget the rural areas. We should always say it's a combination of rural, urban, and places. 70% of the carbon gets produced. 70% of the energy is consumed. So the cities are the battlefield. How we tackle this challenge. So 3 key things in the world is not only food. Food, yes, of course. Healthy food, but energy. Without energy, we're gone. Food, then we have water. So if we're going to be 2 billion more, is to produce food, we need more energy. As Jan said, challenge with the farming. They're not profitable to consume too much energy. So with the need for 2 more billion sanitary, how are we going to do also water? Because we have water scarcity. So these are kind of the most important areas. Secondly, the process, the way we produce food. I'm sure you heard poor people in poverty. And today we're producing 120% food, natural food. So there's a system change as well. What how we produce the food, how we distribute. I believe that indoor farming is an opportunity. This is just not indoor, it's a combination of traditional farming, agricultural farming as well. It's very important. And today it's about almost 700 million people. Isn't that ridiculous? No one should be in poverty. Because globally in total, there are different numbers, but we're already about 30%. So we're production 120% today. We're throwing away so much. No one should be. Particularly that's the cost, as everyone says. So some of that Wall Street and some literally all the money. And I asked them, do you want to eradicate poverty? Everybody nodded. Yeah. Yes, we never. That was quiet. I said, what do you mean? I said, you have all the money, you have the knowledge, you say you're going to do want to change. So why are you doing it? That is something that comes after. That comes to you, not change for me. Every second you have an opportunity to choose. It's not a lack of money or resources. It's not a lack of resources or technology. So think about why are we doing it? Maybe because we don't have to. Because we're using small grass. Maybe. Because it's always why are you doing this? But we talk about it. So that's and well, the irony of this with these Wall Street guys is that US alone spent $800 billion in military each year. And the number to eradicate poverty in the world is 150 billion. I think that's really so. We can fix it tonight. Anyone listening out there, we can do it. Okay, so let's talk about sustainability. Have you heard about it? Okay, it's important. Personally, I've been doing this for since 2006. I've been at Greta Thunberg 6 to 10. Then I need to have a strategy, better strategy here. People listening because we have technology, we have money. Why isn't this happening? Maybe it can be an education, initiative, information, education. So, for me personally, the story of this, I say that sustainability starts with me. Comes to more and more mentors, unfortunately, passed away last year. 84-year young people architect who also inspired me to this field. He said, one of the sentences when I met him the first time was, we have to stop building storage boxes for people. How are we doing for time? Are we okay? Okay? Good. You okay? You okay? So he said, Lars, we have to stop building storage boxes for people. That will solve the issue, social issue. Anders, Michael's, he built this eco village that everybody talks about like 50 years ago. 50 years ago. So it's possible, we can do it. So coming back to you, I said you mentioned it comes to self-leadership, that comes to education. How can we support is not to different organization? And I think it's important to point out how young movements because it's not education and support. Why aren't we supporting them with tools, money, places to be? So I'm not saying so much about this stuff. It's been said before, it's a humongous opportunity. In food for 10 million people, soil, production, supply chain, all things. And Luciano mentioned some numbers of the farming. My view is that there's enough business for everybody. Focus on solutions, and there's enough resources as well. $69 trillion after all the stock exchanges. When you're looking on the food and agricultural industry, it actually produces 30% of the world carbon. So you can sort of do the math of the number there. We don't have to think so much as an entrepreneur. It's a market. It's limitless. So people after farming, keep it short with this one, so as Jan said, it's not profitable yet. You see, we got some really great news yesterday from the US. Walmart, the big chain, they actually invested in plant. So as plant is one of the major indoor farm groups that have achieved investment capital. So there's a reason why Walmart was one numbers mentioned. There's a reason why Walmart invested in farm. So traditional indoor farming, we talk about hydroponics. One of the first companies I met in 2008 was actually Nordic hydroponics. I was in shock when I visited. It's like an engineer, inventor, went to his home lab, came into his home lab, or hot house, expansion of his house, it was smelly, it was noisy, fish, this was tomatoes. I said, what is this? But he was really using the opportunity of hydroponics to use both fish or combine that with. So they are one of the now industrialized, commercialized, and Nordic indoor farm. They're now doing these, but they have a challenge that come into there when we do that. There's some new technology and breakthrough in farming. This is a company out of Singapore. They are the next generation of indoor hydroponics. It's called nanoponics. So they use colloidal gas. So you don't need as much water. You don't need soil. They have developed also a new lighting system, so the channel is to see how this fits in to help the industry. So they reduce the cost in tests since 2017, maybe up to 60%. So they're still in early stages and they're now entering the markets here. So I mentioned two earlier, and it's really interesting to see how we can maybe do some research projects. It's a huge deal. Okay. So to mention the last point there, I want to give you a recommendation for next week's session. There's a group out in Norway called BrIAS Forum F01 So they are now coming with doing recycling and waste recycling. They have a new patent for recycling phosphorus. Phosphorus is needed as fertilizer and it's limited. So if we don't continue to recycle phosphorus, we're screwed. But basically we are, because we need phosphorus as fertilizer. So they have an event next week that I want to share with you. You can go to Easy Mind there. Really interesting research there as well. You see. Yeah. So here it comes to the call to action. It's an invitation to all everybody out there. There are research centers leading in the Nordics who are interested. There's sort of forming something called market lab, which means you can produce high quality local food far away in the Nordics on the lab now. I'm sure how many have been up there? Okay, well, they're going to produce the best food in the world, so you want to go there. But they have some really challenges. They really want to do as big as factories of the craft in the North Sea. It's called Moturu. Usually they're about batteries as well. So they are going to be 3,000 new trees over there. They need in the region of Sweden, they're going to be able to use green steel. So 2 new factories without coal. So they need 10,000 talents in 10 years. For 10 years. How on earth are they going to be able to ensure that maybe it could be produce the best local produced high quality food. So research and side projects here would be to look at these companies, study, produce, because it's part of the art. So you need to have really new solutions. What would it mean if you say, what I'm talking about is advanced farming? you can actually look at combine here the health sector, pharma, the medicine, doctors, look at, okay, I need D vitamin. So how about you produce mine? Because the benefit of monopony is that since the particles are small, you have vitamins and nutrients to the spinach or any of the crops. So right now, we have about 70 different venues or produce or crops. But basically, our opponent is start putting the gas on the flight. Just make seed or something with fruits that wants to grow and attach that to that. So that's really interesting to look at. So we're planning to have a launch at the Nordics for that. There's not enough food to housing as well. Community, because this human exchange is really. If we want change in the community, where does it start? It starts with us. Simple. Second invitation for passion for local march in Stockholm. This now opponents will launch. This is invitation only to the first areas. So we can go to the info sign. We don't know yet because of the patients what's going on. I have moved it 3 times. It's going to be limited. Just like here. Also going to be really interested to anyone who's interested. So, what do we do? Awards? Awards? It's not much more to say. What do we do with that simple image? This is it. Are you ready? Are you ready? Wow, well, are you ready? So, onwards and upwards. Thank you so much for health, tech, hardware, software, listed global company set up in Australia. So all in all, 30 years as an entrepreneur. And we have our contact details there. Anyone who is interested wants to have a chat, talk about opportunities for the company, is